what you want, when you want it, where you want it. This is The Mesh.
Footcandle Films. Film news and reviews from two guys who really like movies.
This episode is brought to you by the Footcandle Film Society. For a schedule of upcoming screenings and membership information, visit the Society's website at www.footcandle.org.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Footcandle Films here on themesh.tv. I'm Alan.
Is this encrypted?
Oh, well, yes, I think it should be. Did you enter your security code and set up your encryption before we started recording?
I mean, I think I did, but I don't know if it was the double encryption code that you sent me on an email that had to be downloaded and then resent back through the encryption process.
I did exactly what you just described on my end as well. So we should be secure with the recording today.
But this is going to go on the internet.
Well, yes, but I think everybody on the listening audience is going to have the proper encryption key to decode it as well. So we should be okay.
Okay, then I'm Chris.
Okay, good.
Chris Fry.
And that's important to note because we are going to be discussing as our first film the documentary Citizenfour dealing with the Edward Snowden release of security information. So it's good to know we're both on a high level security here in our recording. Hopefully those of you at home are so as well. Now, beyond that film review, we're also going to have a couple more discussions. We're going to be discussing the film It Follows, or at least Chris is, as he regales me in his venture to watch a more modern horror film in the movie theater. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about a Netflix documentary that you can watch now called Game Over, the Story of Atari, as we talk about the old 1970s and 80s video game empire. I've got a lot to say today in all my reviews that we'll be discussing. So we're looking forward to a good show. Have a couple quick news items in there as well, and then we'll cap it off with our recommendations of the episode as well. So, Chris, are we ready to begin?
Yes.
Okay. This is Footcandler 5 signing off. Let's move on to our first review, which is Citizenfour.
I say it is insecure. My one-word
That's your one-word review is insecure, and mine is jarring.
Okay.
So let's get started.
Laura. I am a senior government employee in the intelligence community. I hope you understand that contacting you is extremely high risk. In the end, if you publish the source material, I will likely be immediately implicated. I ask only that you ensure this information makes it home to the American public. Thank you, and be careful. Citizenfour.
Sorry, I don't know anything about you.
Okay, I work for,
Sorry, I don't know your name.
Oh, sorry, my name is Edward Snowden.
So you heard Chris and mine's one-word review of the film Citizenfour. Mine is jarring. Chris's is insecure, which I like the little play on words with that.
There you go.
So why, you may ask, those were our one-word reviews for this film. Well, the documentary is about Edward Snowden. And basically what happens in this documentary is we have a documentarian who's contacted by Citizenfour. It's the code name used online. She and a reporter travel to Hong Kong to have a series of meetings with a mysterious Mr. Snowden. Now, the way I just described this may sound like a dramatic reenactment of this historic thing. That's not what this is. This is a documentary, so we're actually watching footage being gathered as this is happening. So we've got a very interesting documentary being made by director Laura Poitras and starring Edward Snowden, having a reporter Glenn Greenwald, William Benny, who's a former security expert that's featured in the film quite a bit, and then a few other political figures that you probably will recognize as well. Chris, with this unique take on a documentary, with the fact that we're watching history being made as it's recorded, not people talking heads talking about what happened in the past. No, this is every single bit, real time, happening at that moment.
Right.
And you using the word insecure, me using the word jarring. Let's feed off of that. How did you respond to this film in general, and did it take this approach of putting you in the room as history is being made? Did it work for you, or did it somewhat backfire in its intent and maybe cause more complications or confusion or more insecurity than it really needed to?
This documentary succeeded in being one of the few that I can call out as being very original, because It wasn't a documentary the style that I'm typically used to, where a story has happened in the past.
Mm-hmm.
People are interviewed in front of nice backdrops. They show some original footage, and that's kind of how a lot of documentaries play out, because usually they're showing something that's happened 20 years ago or something like that. But as you alluded to, yeah, this documentary is unique in that these people shot this thing not really knowing what was going on.
Yeah.
I mean, they got an encrypted message, which was kind of where the whole encryption joke came from. That basically is like, this guy says in a very encrypted email, "I've got some information that's going to blow your mind. I know the filmmaker, the director, had already made some documentaries. So he's like, I know that you are interested in this type thing. I think you'd be perfect. Come talk to me. I'll make it worth your while." But because of how shady and kind of dodgy, she's like, okay, something big's up.
Yeah.
And yeah, she goes there, and it kind of took me a minute, because I was the same as you. I was like, oh, they're already interviewing Edward Snowden, like, after he's already spilled everything. But what I came to realize is, like, no, they're talking to him, and nothing's actually been released yet.
Yeah,
Nobody knows who he is.
They
Nobody
didn't
knows
know
his name.
anything.
Yeah, and that kind of blew my mind.
I will say, I agree with you. The moment where, and this is not a spoiler for the film. I mean, it's just helping you understand what kind of film we're talking about. The moment very early on in the first 15, 20 minutes where it's basically, all right, can you tell us your name and, tell us a little bit about your background? That really was them getting to know this gentleman, Edward Snowden, for the very first moment. And that's crazy.
Yes.
I love the fact that this film was able to capture a full-form documentary as it was happening, with no pre-planning, no thoughts about what we're trying to make out of this. It's more, we know we need to document this because this could be important.
It's an incredible example of right place, right time, right people that had the know-how and the skills to be able to pull this documentary off. And, the Oscars were very recently, and this won the Best Documentary Oscar.
Right.
And after seeing it, I can completely understand why, because it stands as something that will be watched, years from now. And it's like, wow, if you wanted an example of what was going on and how this happened, watch this documentary, because they were literally finding it out as it went.
It did make me think a little bit about the act of killing.
Okay.
In the sense that I'm starting to get in my head this idea of there being two types of documentaries. There's your active documentaries and there's your passive ones. Active, it's happening. You're capturing it as it's going on.
Sure.
You're there. You don't really know where the story is going to go. You're just recording to see what happens. And in the end, you can put it together to make something out of it. The passive ones are, let's talk about what happened.
And
let's get the interviews.
And that's
let's
the style that I'm used to.
We're all
It's
used
more
to
of the
it.
passive
Well, there's
documentary.
definitely more passive documentaries out there than there are
Absolutely.
active ones.
Sure.
It's a lot easier to get a bunch of people together and interview them and talk about something that happened in the past
Right.
than to actually capture something historic happening at the moment.
Right.
So I'm a big fan of these active documentaries, I'm going to call them, just because I love the fact that you don't know where it's going to go. They don't know where it's going to go at the moment. Now, there's a little bit of a fallacy with an active documentary as well, in that it may not always have an ending. It may not always have a structure. And this film doesn't have an ending in my head. I'm not saying it needs one, but it is one of those things where it does get to a point and you're still left wanting to know where things are going and what's going to happen. But unfortunately, the documentary can't tell you that because it hadn't happened yet. I mean, it's capturing this event, but it's not able to put it into a structure where you've got a beginning, middle, end.
And the event basically was they fly to Hong Kong, and in 8 days,
Yeah.
they spend that time with Snowden basically trapped in a hotel room. That's the footage you get, is a hotel room.
Yeah.
But they talk to him and ask him questions, and you see them trying to figure out how they're going to tell the story and how they are going to. And Snowden actually tells them, "Hey, I'm going to tell you stuff, and however you guys think it is best to release this bombshell on the world, I trust you because you're journalists."
Yep.
And he says that's why I did it this way, because I wanted you to be a filter so that you would decide what is okay, what is not okay.
He didn't want to just go up on a public website and just dump all
And
this
just dump it
stuff
all.
and not know how it was going to be responded, reacted to, treated, or anything else.
Correct.
I thought that was interesting. Of course, the documentary plays with a lot of questions of national security
Absolutely.
and the role that the government plays, the depth that the government's involved. There's a lot of damning evidence and information about the government's role in security. I will put it out there that I admired the film, and I generally enjoyed is not the word, but I generally really appreciated the film for what it was doing and the message it was giving.
Sure.
I do have a couple quirks with it in that I do feel like it was extremely one-sided. Documentaries in general are normally through the lens of the filmmaker. I get that. I'm all very respectful of that. But when you've got such a hotbed sensitive topic, there were a few other sides of the coin that I would have liked to have had a few minutes dedicated to for some responses.
Sure.
Because it's really easy to come out of a documentary like this mad
Right.
and upset and frightened and worried. But there's also a lot of other sides of the story that are not touched on at all. I'm not saying those other sides will outweigh the story and make you feel completely different, but I think there needs to be some even-handedness to the other sides of the coin when you're dealing with such a sensitive topic like this.
Sure, and I agree. I think, if I were to nail down a shortcoming for me, it would be that as well, because having been used to the passive documentaries that you mentioned, you do kind of, generally they try to balance the scales a little bit more to try to give you a little bit more viewpoints. But an excuse of this active documentary is they had him in a hotel room.
Yeah.
They didn't have all these other panelists that they could bring in and talk. They did try at one point, because he is in Hong Kong, they do show some news up on the screen of the TV screen in his hotel room after they've released some documents and after some stories have been hitting, major papers around the world. And they kind of get his reaction a little bit as far as how do you feel, but you don't have any true reactions about commentators reacting to the situation.
Exactly. The whole big question of, was he a patriot by doing what he did? You've got part of the country saying yes, he was, part of the country saying no, he's a traitor. And that was never played with.
Sure.
That never really got very deep. And I would have loved, and again, I'm saying I would have loved the filmmakers to do this, which unfortunately, this is the kind of film where you can't go back and tell the filmmaker, I wish you would have done this, and I wish you would have had that, because they honestly were just filming what happened.
Right.
So
they were documenting.
This didn't happen. Or if it did, it was not meaningful enough to put in the film. So, but to have that discussion of how does he respond to people who say he's a traitor for the way he did this, which I think that's more my question mark, is the manner in which it was done versus what was done, the intent. It definitely is a film that generates a lot of discussion, and those are always the ones I love the most. Even if you don't like the film or you don't like every moment of it, the fact that it does lead to some great conversation, I think is a good thing. Overall, I'm giving it a very positive score for that.
I thought, considering how we've talked about how it was made, two aspects of the film that stood out to me as being very realistic was, one, the paranoia that pervaded the film. You could see Snowden was, rightfully so, very concerned about being found out, or concerned about security on his laptop, security about, just worried in general about being, taken.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And the journalist, I felt like some of that kind of seeped into them, kind of being worried about, how the press is going to react to me, how I'm going to be swarmed. And then they, at some points, they were shooting, recording him in Hong Kong, and at some point they had to stop, because then they were like, wait, we're being followed, and if we're being followed, they're going to find him. And so they had to, there's this big cat and mouse game, and I thought that was, it's what you would expect, and that they showed that on screen and made you kind of feel paranoid, insecure.
Yeah. I think they did do a good job of capturing that. I mean, it wasn't, I really appreciate the fact that they didn't use music to heighten any dramatic moments or swell any kind of emotions. The music they used was, if you could call it music, it was really almost more of a white noise in a lot of times. And I think that was intentionally done to dull you a little bit to what was going on, or maybe make you more tense to what was going on. It wasn't meant to raise or lower emotions. It was more of a droning sound at times, which I thought was an interesting choice.
And I had an idea who may have provided the music, and then in the credits, the end song, once that song kicked in, I think it actually had words. I was like, there's no doubt who this is.
Yeah.
And it was Trent Reznor and Nine Inch Nails. And what was funny is I looked later online, and that music was actually taken from an album that he released, Creative Commons online.
Okay.
Which kind of makes sense. It's like,
so they could use it for whatever they wanted.
They could use it for whatever. And to include that in this documentary, it's kind of that, I don't know,
same kind of movement
underground idea. So I thought that fit. The other thing I was going to say, too, as far as the sense of authenticity of the film, the paranoia was one aspect, but then them shooting Edward Snowden, they get to the hotel room and showing him as you first see him, And then I felt like as the days clicked on, you could tell that he was becoming more tired, more stressed. His, hair was kind of disheveled. There were some circles under his eyes. And then at one point towards the end of the film, after some events have occurred, they showed him, and he looked horrible.
He looked pretty rough.
Like the circles under his eyes looked like he'd gotten 2 black eyes. Like he'd been playing. It was like, wow. And, that felt pretty authentic.
No, I don't question one bit of the authenticity of anything we saw in the film. Sometimes when people have a camera pointing at them, you're going to have things heightened, you're going to have things exaggerated, you're going to have a little playing to the camera. I didn't get the sense of that at all here. I mean, I don't even think, this is the interesting thing to note. Sometimes when you do put a camera in front of people and they know you're making a documentary, it can cause you to raise your energy level, your personality a little bit, whatever it may be.
You start acting for the camera, even though it's a documentary, but you start acting.
Edward Snowden had no intentions of this being a documentary. I think he just knew that they just wanted to record more of it could be for posterity. It could be just to have a record. Well, and it never seemed to came across as we're making a documentary, so you've got to play a certain part.
No, and I think too, if my memory serves correctly, some of the shots that we saw of them asking him questions, his responses, those were exactly what was up on CNN showing. And so it was like, basically it was the way to give it to the news media and let them show it on TV. So it was like, and then they made this documentary.
Right. So I think that's important to note. Is I don't think anybody sat around saying, "Oh, we're going to make this awesome documentary of this."
It this way.
I think it's more of we're documenting this because A, for security purposes, B, to have it as historical record, C, this is the way we're going to release it all to the media. So let's have a good, nice video documentation of everything. So it was interesting.
The paranoia, the fire alarm in the hotel.
Yes, there's a good, interesting scene with that definitely shows how that paranoia plays up on things. Overall, Citizenfour, a very interesting documentary. I think going into it, do not expect it to be a very traditional talking heads interview based documentary, because it's not.
Yeah.
You're getting dumped in, and at some points it is jarring, the word I use. Sometimes you don't quite know what's happening or what they're talking about. There's a lot of text messages on the screen. It's hard sometimes to figure out who's talking to who and what they're implying. It took me the second viewing. I watched the last 20 minutes the second time last night at the end of our second screening. And getting to piece initials together and some of the messages and all made it a little better. So it's a tough watch. It's an intentional watch. Don't come into it thinking you're going to understand every term they're talking about and every process. There's a lot of technical talk that's way over everybody else's head. But I think in the end, the message comes across that they're trying to get across and help you share in the story that they're documenting. So I was impressed. I really was.
I was too. And as far as being thrown, the opening where you hear Laura Poitras's voice and she's kind of describing the message that she got from Edward Snowden. And unfortunately, they're just showing images at this point, and they're not showing any text on screen. And she was using all this back and forth thing, and I'm like, what is going on?
Yeah.
I couldn't really grasp it. Then I got it. I was like, and then I kind of caught on, but for a little bit there, I was like,
well, the first 10 minutes of the film, I really was not enjoying it. I was disjointed. I didn't know what was going on. It was way too technical, way too it was hard to follow. And it wasn't until they got into the hotel room and got settled in, I'm like, okay, now I get what's going on. It just took me a little while to kind of get settled in. So,
and I don't know if that was an intentional to try to make you feel as on ease and on the run as they were. But like you say, it was effective. So and jarring.
So that's Citizenfour. It is, I think it's coming out on DVD or online probably sometime in May, if I remember correctly, or maybe late April.
Okay.
So maybe by the time you're listening to this, it may be available to rent or watch online, because it didn't get the broadest wide release, I don't think, especially for a niche documentary like this. But it did win Best Documentary at the Oscars. So Chris and I both say it's definitely worth watching. Just insecure and jarring. That's our 2 one-word reviews. Let's move on we got 2 kind of shorter reviews, really more one-sided reviews, because Chris has seen one film that I have not seen. I've seen a film he has not seen. So we're going to kind of talk about those independently. So first, let me set this up for you, Chris. Chris is here to talk about the latest new generation horror film called It Follows.
And it's retro creepy.
Retro creepy is your word?
Yes.
Gotcha. Okay, awesome.
Jay, you awake? You're not going to believe me, and I need you to remember what I'm saying.
This thing, it's going to follow you.
Somebody gave it to me, and I passed it to you. Wherever you are, it's somewhere walking straight for you. All you can do is pass it along to someone else.
Chris, I am a wuss. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and go on public record here. Horror films creep me out. Now, I'm not talking about slasher films.
Right.
The after Friday the 13th, the first one, it just got just gory, chopping up death. I don't care.
Sure.
I'm talking about truly creepy horror films where it's psychological or it's just creepy in general. Those really get to me. So we had a conversation. I had planned to go see this film the other night, and come to find out our local theater thought it would be wiser to only show this film in the middle of the afternoon instead of at night, which I don't quite understand. But unfortunately, I did not get a chance to see this film. You did.
Yes.
Now, I think you're closer to me than not in that you're not the biggest horror fan.
Never.
I don't know how creeped out you get by them, but I think in general, you don't go seeking out new horror films when they come out. We really just started checking this one out because we heard some interesting things online about it. So with that all being said, it getting a little bit of internet hype and buzz right now with a lot of film critics. How did you feel? Did it match your expectations of being a very interesting, unique, or new, fresh horror film, or did it fall into a lot of the same stereotypes we always expect with this?
No, it was definitely fresh and unique, and basically, like you stated, I'm not the biggest horror movie fan, and basically for me to see a horror movie, it has to be like on that year's greatest hits.
Okay.
Like you have to, I have to hear a lot of buzz about it.
A lot of people have to tell you it's a really good
Right,
movie.
I'm not just going to run out and see it. But
Right.
if I hear, like, Blair Witch Project, heard people talking about it, went and saw it.
It was buzzworthy.
Right, it was buzzworthy.
all right.
Something like The Ring, I'd heard a lot about that. I saw that and I liked it.
Okay.
I made the mistake of Paranormal Activity, heard a lot of people talk about
yeah.
it. Halloween night, put it up on Netflix, watched it in a house by myself. Not the smartest move I've ever made.
There you go.
But I am glad that I did it because I could say, okay, now have I watched the 5 million sequels? No. But I could see the original movie.
Right.
This movie, I thought really worked. And I think you could have gone to go see it late at night.
And did okay.
Even though I did chicken out and go see it during the day.
Keep in mind, my family's been out of town all week. I would have been coming home at midnight to a dark, empty house. So you still think I would have been okay?
I think so. And
Okay.
a lot of that centers around the premise of the movie.
All right.
Which it is a typical, well, not typical, but teen horror movie like you would have seen back in like the 70s or 80s. Because it does center around like sexual activity.
Okay.
And basically what happens is there's some teenagers and they have a sexual encounter in a car and then the girl is chloroformed. And you're like, what's happening? Why did the guy just chloroform her after they had sex? And next thing you know, she wakes up in a parking garage and she's tied to a wheelchair and he says, and you think, uh-oh, where's this going? This is going to get really disturbing. It doesn't get really disturbing, but basically he tells her, look, I'm sorry, but it's going to come after you now. It has been coming after me. I transferred it to you in the car. I'm sorry, but all I can tell you is you have to keep running. Keep running or give it to someone else, but go. Like, I'm sorry, but this is the only way I could get rid of it. I'm sorry.
Okay.
And that's kind of where the movie takes off. So
And that's all I probably want you to tell me about it plot-wise too. Okay.
Right.
All right. But so there are no known actors in this. I mean, it's all unknowns. I mean, how production-wise and acting-wise and all that. I mean, was it a well-made film?
Yeah, production-wise, I mean, do they have the millions that other horror movies do?
Right.
No, but acting-wise, I think it was good. I
Okay.
think the actors, for what they're asked to do, I think they do good. There's the main girl whose name is Jay in the film, and her real name is Maika Monroe, and she's good. There's a guy who plays her childhood best friend, and his name is Keir Gilchrist, but Paul in the film, and he's probably the strongest actor in the film.
Okay.
But what this movie is interested in, which is why it's worth going to see, even if you're not a big fan of horror movies, like you and I aren't, is because it investigates what it's like to be in relationships with people that you're friends with and how that changes. And I don't know, it's a very interesting film. It's not interested in just horror. It's interested in interactions between people.
Okay.
And the awkwardness
good.
that can make. And yeah, and the way they deal with the the thing that is following. The way that's represented and that whole concept makes for a very, very interesting film. Is it flawless? No. But it's definitely worth seeing. And this is only his second film.
Yeah, I was actually just looking that up. David Robert Mitchell was the writer and director.
And
he made a film, The Myth of the American Sleepover.
Which I have heard of, but never seen. And now it is on my watch list. I want to see that. Because
That's always a good sign for the Chris Fry review is, did he put that director's previous work on his watch list after watching this movie? So, good.
And I'll say, too, for an independent film and for a low-budget film, a lower budget, I think it had $2 million. That was it.
Just $2 million.
Just $2 million.
No big deal.
He does some stuff with the camera, specifically some long tracking shots. And I don't think of long tracking shots being used in horror movies because usually it's all about, swish pan over to somebody,
quick cuts,
dodging out of a closet, trying to jab you with a knife. It's about scary reaction shots. And this film, the way it uses its tracking shots, and it has like 4 or 5, and they're usually, when they're done, it's usually like, okay, pay attention. And they do these tracking shots, and they're just amazing. Such the fact where you get to like the third one, you're like, okay, what's going on?
Wow.
There's a lot to kind of chew on.
Awesome.
I'm really anxious to go back and check out his first movie, and really looking forward to his next movie. Retro Creepy. Let me get behind that. The movie was creepy. Obviously, it's a horror movie. Retro, though, in the fact that the music they used was very like Halloween style music or Friday the 13th type music. What, if I had to say a criticism of the film, sometimes that was a little bit too over the top, such that it kind of took me out of the film a little bit.
Right.
Like they were almost using it as making a joke as opposed to, because the film's pretty serious. There's not a lot of funny. I mean, there are some jokes here and there, but it's not, it's got a dark tone, obviously, from the subject matter.
Right.
And so that kind of took me out of it a little bit sometimes when they would kind of overdo some of the music.
Interesting.
But and so that's where the whole retro comes from, because it was kind of a throwback. Yet the time period of the film, it's interesting because they didn't make it like it was totally set in the 1970s or the 1980s. So you could say it was just average kids nowadays. It was kind of like a timeless film in a sense, which was kind of an interesting horror movie to try to make.
All right, so it follows. Chris is advocating and wholeheartedly endorsing. Retro creepy is the word Chris has come up with for that film. Yeah, I think I'm going to see it.
I think you would like it.
All right. I'm going to give it a shot. So, just got to steel myself up for it. Okay, let's move on to something that's not scary in the slightest. Although the game that this documentary is talking about, I owned and hated. Can almost say it was kind of frightening and scary how bad the game was. This is the documentary Atari Game Over, which really deals with the classic Atari 2600 game E.T. the Extraterrestrial.
The worst video game ever. E.T. for Atari.
It was bad. Brutal, unfair, didn't make a lot of sense.
How did a company that was so innovative fail so miserably?
Under that landfill is a burial site of an entire industry.
Growing up, you always read little rumors about it.
The dreams of a generation buried underneath the garbage. You can hear it screaming or something, I don't know.
Billions of cartridges out in the desert.
Alan, I also had an Atari 2600.
Yes.
And yes, I'm not sure if I got it for Christmas or not, but I did get the E.T. game as well.
Probably so, because it came out at Christmas time, and that was all the rage that Christmas season.
And my parents and I was a big fan of E.T., so yeah, maybe I did get it at Christmas. I remember being very frustrated by this game.
Yes.
I remember a year or two ago, I heard the urban legend that there was a big dump somewhere that once Atari went under or something, they threw away all these return cartridges of
all these excess cartridges of that game. Yes, that is the urban legend in a landfill out in Arizona, I believe.
I think so.
Right.
And then Zach Penn, who's a director who I've seen one of his other films that was kind of a mockumentary about Loch Ness and actually had Werner Herzog in it.
Right.
So he's an interesting guy. He chooses to take this and make what I think is a serious, quote, documentary about this whole Atari and this ET game. So should I watch this documentary, Alan, and enjoy it, or do you think I'm going to be frustrated with it, just like I was frustrated with the game?
I'll tell you, my one-word review for this is the word, and I kind of expanded on it for a reason, nostalgialistic.
Okay.
Because it is nostalgia. It's fun.
Okay.
I enjoyed the film a lot. It's not a great documentary, so don't go in expecting to know the whole history of Atari and the whole reason for its demise and the whole production of this game. It gave you the highlights, but it gave you enough.
This is like a McDonald's or a Burger King documentary,
yes.
As far as like a Happy Meal documentary.
Yes, a MIG documentary. That's right.
That's our term.
That's our third type of documentary we're talking about. We got active, we got passive, we got MIG documentary.
MIG documentary. This is a MIG documentary.
It is something that came out, I think it was originally intended to be an episode of like a TV online series called Signal to Noise.
Okay.
So for that reason, it's only like a little over an hour long, so it's not terribly long. And maybe part of the reason why you really didn't get too deep in it. Yeah. Well, I would have loved for this to come longer. What was great about this film is that it really tried to tie the whole ET game and the myth and the legend about it all being buried and all. So you've got some real stuff happening where they are digging up this landfill, trying to see if there's all
that does end
that's
up
in
happening.
there.
Okay.
Along the way, they're tying it to the story of Atari as a company and its demise.
Okay.
So showing the parallels and the links and the connections between them. Now, if you go up on any Wikipedia website or any other website dedicated to the history of Atari, after watching this, you'll realize there's a whole lot left out. There's a whole lot of things not touched on.
Because Atari still lasted for a while after the ET.
Not in the same form. And they address that in the film. It's like basically it goes through a major reduction in staff and change in focus because it lost a lot of money off of 2 games. Supposedly it had the most like losses on in returns. This one wasn't even like the biggest loser for it.
Really?
Pac-Man. The Atari version of Pac-Man was one of the biggest losers for them because the quality was not great. It got a lot of returns. The arcade environment didn't translate to the console environment very well for it. E.T.'s got the reputation, though, because it's an infuriating game and it had tons of returns and tons of unhappy people. So the documentary is interesting for you and I, having grown up in the generation we did.
Right.
You'll have fun watching it because it's a lot of footage of games that we'll remember. It's interviewing some of the game designers. I think the story of how they were charged with making a game for the E.T. movie to tie in is pretty interesting. And it does give a little bit of vindication to the designer as to why the game may not be the best in the world. So it's a fun, interesting watch. Just don't go in expecting it to be a full history of Atari and all the in-depth knowledge of what was going on. I would have loved an hour and a half, almost 2 hour long documentary on the subject because I think there's a lot to tell.
Right.
Because, if you think about it, Atari as a company, it supposedly went from like 1 year being the hottest thing in the world to like within a year or two, it didn't do anything anymore. Like you hardly heard anything about them.
Right.
It changed video games. It changed home entertainment so dramatically, and then to just flame out so quickly. It's really a fascinating story. I would have loved to go a little deeper with it. Okay. This is fine. This is fun. It's great for those of you that were alive during that time and very familiar with the game system and the games themselves. You'll have a lot of fun watching it. Beyond that, you may not. So,
all right, Alan, burning question.
Yes.
Has nothing to do with the documentary, but it kind of does. Were you ever able to complete the phone and call the mothership down to rescue E.T.?
I did.
So did I.
Yes.
So I feel some
I do remember doing that. I remember it being anticlimactic.
To say the least.
I remember it being that's it? Okay. So yes, I did play the game. I actually got it on Christmas and was going to my grandparents for that Christmas weekend and got to take my Atari in the game with me and played it there. And I remember the whole time just kind of sitting there thinking about, wow, this is really hard. Wow, this is annoying. Really, is this the whole game? And it's funny. So I will say watching some of the clips of this game being played in the documentary was also really fun. So
and honestly, I'll watch it just because I want to remember playing that. I have memories of it, but I want to go back and see it again.
Oh yeah, it's fun. So nostalgialistic.
Excellent.
That is my word for it.
And that's Game Over, I believe, is one.
Well, if you go on Netflix, it's actually labeled as Atari: Game Over.
Okay.
That's the name of the film on Netflix. It is on Netflix, so go watch it right now. It's fun to watch.
Okay.
All right, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we'll do just a couple quick news items and then finish up with our recommendations for the episode. Stay tuned. We'll be right back in just a moment. Hi, Alan and Chris here with an exciting announcement about something coming to the Western North Carolina area later this year. It's the first ever Footcandle Film Festival.
That's right, an honest-to-goodness film festival that's happening September 25th through the 27th at the Salt Block in Hickory, North Carolina. Films are being submitted from all over the world to be considered.
Do you or someone you know have a film that you'd like to submit? Visit footcandle.org and follow the link to the festival for instructions.
Stay tuned later in the year as we announce our choices and start selling tickets.
Visit footcandle.org for more information. We'll see you in September. Welcome back to Footcandle Films here on the Mesh.tv. You just heard us go through our discussions of Citizenfour, Atari, Game Over, and It Follows. A nice assortment of interesting films to check out. All discussion worthy, it sounds like, as well. So let's move on to some quick news items before we cap off the show with our recommendations for the episode. Chris, I've got one news item that I'm really torn on if I even want to talk about.
Oh.
It's going to... do we have a rating system on the podcast? I mean, is there, seriously, is there a PG level?
Oh.
Because I don't know if I can talk about this news item without trouncing into a little more PG-13 area at least.
Oh. We talked about It Follows, so
we're
probably
okay. Here's the thing. And we talked about horror films and the kind of horror films I really I don't mind watching, but I really have no desire to watch are some of these torture porn.
Yes.
And I assuming, because I know you pretty well, that you're not a big fan either.
I'm not. Now, that being said, I have never seen the first Saw.
Okay.
And because there's a huge franchise, I don't know how many they've made, 4 or 5 or whatever. But because that launched a franchise, I actually am interested in going back and seeing just the first one. Mm-hmm. Granted, it'll probably be in the middle of the day, with the lights on and everything. But in general, no, that kind of stuff doesn't interest me. No.
So I'm assuming you have not, because I have not either. Okay. I'm talking about films here that I've never seen and have no desire to see. Okay. But I think it's interesting to bring up the fact that these movies are still being made.
Okay.
The Human Centipede.
Yes, I know.
And everybody in the studio is shaking their head feverishly, like, no. Yeah, I'm not even going to describe what it is.
They've already made 2.
They've made 2. Well, they're making a 3rd one.
Really?
Oh, yeah.
Well, I have to give him. The first one had a very disgusting premise. If you know what it is, great. If you don't, you probably don't want to know what it is.
No, you don't. I'm going to let anybody who's interested, they can go online and look it up. I'm not going to describe it.
The second movie, though, if my memory I haven't seen either, but it's like documenting somebody that was like a fan of the first movie and then decides to do what the person was. So that was an interesting take on trying to make a sequel, trying to make a follow-up.
Yes, they did. Tom Six, the writer-director, again, I don't know anything about the guy, made the first one. The second one was a very much more of a meta commentary on the first one,
right?
But also extremely disgusting.
Well, I mean, that's his thing.
And wicked. Now, this third one even goes more meta.
Really?
Yeah, supposedly so. Supposedly it's and I'm going to be very judicious with my plot summary.
Okay.
Guys who are running a prison. The prison is having a hard time controlling its inmates.
Oh, man.
And one of the prison wardens decides, after watching the other movies.
Both of them.
Yeah.
One end.
Decides that he has a idea of how to better control the inmates. And I'm going to leave it there.
Wow.
So I will give it just on the surface, the whole meta on top of meta on top of meta. Okay, that's cool. That's interesting.
See,
I will not see this film. I have no desire to see it. I'm just putting it out there because we want to be the equal opportunity film review show and at least discuss and let you know this out there.
What really bothers me, I wish you would have never told me that because I haven't seen any of these movies. I don't want to see any of these movies, but yet I kind of do. And actually, I think I can completely skip the first one, but seeing the meta nature of the second one and possibly this third one, it does interest me because I'm all about like movies that have more than one layer and stuff. But I can't get away from the fact that because apparently there's still a lot of gore and disgusting stuff. that's really what he's interested in, not the meta commentary. But I have to admit, that is interesting.
All I'm going to say is 500 people.
Wow. Okay.
Leave it at that.
Okay.
So again, I'm already making myself even thinking about the film, and we're going to move on.
Okay.
So cheer us up. Give us something a little nicer, a little better.
I feel like
Chris.
I should talk about the new Pixar movie coming out, but I don't have any news on that. So,
right.
But I will say, kind of a throwback to our first review, biopic sound.
Yes.
There's going to be one of Edward Snowden.
Yeah. Very true.
Yep.
Oliver Stone, correct?
It is, and it's in production right now.
Joseph Gordon-Levitt.
In Germany, and Joseph Gordon-Levitt's going to play Snowden. Melissa Leo is going to play the filmmaker Laura Poitras, who goes over there and tries to interview him.
And your girl Shailene Woodley is his wife, his girlfriend, right?
Yeah. Lindsay Mills. So interesting. Having just seen a documentary about the situation, but it was a action documentary, as you talked about. Oliver Stone's going to do a documentary. The man who gave us JFK.
Well, he's not doing a documentary. He's doing a narrative dramatic film.
He's doing like he did for JFK. He's doing this. He did for Nixon. How do you feel going?
Well, Chris, we've always talked about when we watch a biopic, we always ask the question: would we have rather seen this as a documentary? Was there any reason to see it acted out by actors, or could we have seen documents and have people talk about it and got just as much out of it? There's a lot of, especially the more musical documentaries, I could always argue I would have rather seen a good documentary about it because I think I would have learned more.
Sure.
The Theory of Everything was another great example from just a couple months ago where I think you and I both said, a documentary probably would have given us more insight than what we got in this film. I will say, though, this one, I think, lends itself to a good dramatic film because I think the documentary plays one role. The documentary shows the process, the technical aspects of how it happened, what happened. But because we're only watching whatever they're turning the camera on and we're not having people talking about their feelings and what they're feeling at the time and emotions, we never really got to explore what truly was going on in the back of Edward Snowden's head. We got a lot of ideas.
Or what was even going in the back of the documentarian's head.
Yeah.
Like, what am I getting into? What is going on? What have I found with this
So
dude?
I do think there's an interesting story there. This is one of the few biopics that I would be interested to see, just already hearing about it.
Okay.
Where the other one that Joseph Gordon-Levitt is in, where he plays the guy, the tight walker,
or whatever,
from
Man on Wire.
Man on Wire, and they're doing one called The Walk, which is a stupid name.
And interestingly enough, I know it says right here, if I can trust IMDb, that the Snowden document or biopic is coming out December 25th, 2015. So The Walk is also coming out.
That's the same day. Isn't it supposed to be Christmas?
I think it's supposed to be.
2 Christmas films with Joseph Gordon-Levitt playing a real person?
Yes.
With Robert Zemeckis directing one and Oliver Stone directing the other?
Yes.
That is weird.
So it's going to be the battle.
Somebody's going to move.
The battle of the biopics.
Somebody's going to move. They can't release both those on the same day.
I would tend to think that The Walk's probably going to move.
Yeah.
Although, if you're going to see one movie on Christmas Day, I don't know that you really want to see Snowden, which is probably going to be a downer.
The Walk will probably be much more inspiring and uplifting by the end. So, well, I am curious. I'm hit or miss with Oliver Stone. I really love Born on the 4th of July. I really like JFK.
Which was a biopic, Born on the 4th of July.
They were both. They're both biopics in a way. Oliver Stone's own take on a biopic. But
you like Platoon, probably?
Yeah, Platoon was fine.
Okay.
Platoon was fine. Past JFK, I really haven't seen much of his stuff. Natural Born Killers just gave me headaches every time I tried to see parts of it. So I'm very hit or miss with Oliver Stone. I'm not one of those guys that feels like I've got to run out and see a film of his.
Gotcha.
But I'm intrigued, and I think if he's got the right subject matter, which I would say Edward Snowden is, I think there's an interesting film there to watch. So, cool. So that's a couple news items. One extremely disgusting, one very intriguing. So we'll let you decide which one you're going to go online and read up more about after this episode is done. But Chris, let's finish up our episode here with our recommendations, where we both like to bring up a film that we think you ought to check out, either one from the past, one maybe you might have missed, maybe just a classic that needs to be revisited. But the idea is finding something that we can get our hands on online in some way, shape, or form. What have you got to share with us, Chris?
Okay, I'm going to have a government paranoia double feature.
Ooh, nice.
for my recommendation. Both are, one is just based on a fiction book, and it's from the 1970s, 1975. Robert Redford, 3 Days of the Condor.
Oh, wow. You caught up on that, huh?
Yeah, I'd never seen it, and I just watched it recently. Faye Dunaway, Robert Redford.
Yeah.
He works for the CIA, I believe, and something goes wrong, and he has to then find out why he's being, hunted down. So... 3 Days of the Condor has lots of good government paranoia in there. And then one that just came out this past year that I just recently caught up with, Kill the Messenger, with Jeremy Renner.
Jeremy Renner. I've heard about that one.
And that's all about drugs that were being sold and money was going to Nicaragua from the American government, may have had a part in it, CIA. And he plays the part of a journalist who's uncovering all this dirt, basically, on the American government and what they might have been doing to help illegally fund things in Nicaragua. So, interesting, and also has a lot of people telling them, you don't need to dig into this story, don't do this. A lot of ethics involved. So very similar to...
Man, you are in complete conspiracy,
that's right,
undercover mode right now with your film watching. That's awesome. Yeah. That's really cool.
So that's the double Kill the Messenger and 3 Days of the Condor.
I also have a film that's rooted in intrigue and mysterious people and danger and
Goonies.
All right, and let me back up why I'm recommending this to people to check out. Mission Impossible 3. Here's the deal with that one. I love action spy movies.
Okay.
Tom Cruise is an actor I enjoy watching on screen. He is a character I enjoy watching on screen.
Sure.
When the first Mission Impossible came out, which was directed by famous guy.
Yeah, it made De Palma.
Yeah, Brian De Palma.
Yeah.
I was terribly excited. I went with my friends to go see it opening night and came away confused. It's not quite sure what happened in the plot. There were some cool moments.
Sure.
But overall, the film was
was that the one with lots of masks that were full face?
They were masks and the glasses that you could transmit your image of what you're seeing to somebody else and all.
Right.
It was just a very confusing movie, but it had some cool moments.
Sure.
Second Mission Impossible came out. I was also terribly excited. I saw it in Las Vegas when I was there on vacation. Whoa. John Woo's directing. I loved Face Off. I thought Face Off was awesome. And I wanted to see this movie.
Fun title for a movie.
And man, it was not good. It was just overblown, dumb, didn't work.
Okay.
So Mission Impossible 3 comes around. I'm curious only because a certain director, a fresh-faced director by the name of J.J. Abrams, is attached to direct it. I'm a big fan of Mr. Abrams from the TV work he was doing on Alias TV show, which I really did like.
Gotcha.
So I'm like, ooh. So now he's going to get to do a spy movie when I've been enjoying his spy TV show, and he's going to take on Mission Impossible, and it's got Tom Cruise and all that. So I go see it, and it's really good. It's also got Philip Seymour Hoffman as the bad guy, which is another reason why it's really good.
Right.
This is also the movie where they introduce, you got Ving Rhames still doing his sidekick role like he has been for a while, but Simon Pegg is introduced as kind of a part of the team, as kind of a more techie guy called Benji. So they've kind of reset the whole franchise a little bit and said, all right, now these are the characters. Let's go forward. And they've made another film since then, Ghost Protocol, which was okay. It wasn't great. I didn't like it as much.
I fell asleep.
It just wasn't as good.
Okay.
It got a lot of reviews and people love it, but I just didn't think it was as good as the third one. To me, that Mission Impossible 3 is that's what a Mission Impossible movie ought to be. Okay. The reason I'm bringing it up is because there is a fifth one coming out now. It is called something.
This is
Rogue Nation. Rogue Nation, that's it.
Too, because wasn't Jeremy Renner supposed to, as of Ghost Protocol, he was kind of going to replace
He was going to replace it. But you saw how well Jeremy Renner replacing a main franchise character worked for the Bourne Identity series. He didn't. And supposedly they're even getting Matt Damon to come back and do the Bourne series again now. Tom Cruise, I don't think, wanted to let go of Mission Impossible yet. So we've got Mission Impossible Rogue Nation. The trailer just came out a couple weeks ago. It's good. Of course, every Mission Impossible trailer, I think, is good because it's fun, exciting. Yes, and you got Tom Cruise hanging on the side of a plane as it takes off the ground.
Okay. Did it show him running?
Oh, yeah, of course. Okay. Every Tom Cruise movie has to have him running.
Excellent.
Christopher McQuarrie is the director, and you may not recognize that name. He recently did the film with Tom Cruise, Jack Reacher.
Okay.
And he also is a writer of a lot of other good action movies. I've never seen Jack Reacher, but the people like Christopher McQuarrie so far as a director goes.
Okay.
So I am saying if you got a fix and you saw the latest trailer and you're kind of back into a Mission Impossible vibe, just go see number 3. You don't need to see any of the other ones. Go see number 3. Have a good time with it. I think it's a great, fun action movie. And I think it's one of my favorite Tom Cruise movies. Definitely my favorite Mission Impossible movie. And one of the better action spy movies in the last 10 years.
Okay.
There you go. Boom. I just dropped the mic. I didn't actually drop the mic. These mics are kind of expensive.
Yeah, that's not too bad.
So, Chris, we just kind of recapped with our recommendations. You had your conspiracy doubleheader films with 3 Days of the Condor and...
Kill the Messenger.
Kill the Messenger, that's right. I'm talking about Mission Impossible 3. We talked about Citizenfour. We talked about Atari. We talked about sex-driven horror movie, indie movie, It Follows. So we had a lot of movies to cover in this episode. A lot of stuff going on. If people wanted to check in with us, talk to us, follow up with us, give us their ideas on any of our reviews, Chris, what are some of the ways they could do so?
Probably the easiest that you can do is just jot us an email at info@themesh.tv. Just let us know what you're thinking about our reviews, a movie you have heard that's coming out that you want us to review. You can also go to the website, and it is cleverly at themesh.tv, where you'll find lots of other shows and podcasts, but in addition to ours, where you can catch up with back episodes if you so choose. And then there's always Letterboxd. Alan and I both review movies from time to time on there and put up what we've been watching lately.
Yeah, so a lot of different ways to reach out to us. Main thing is we want to hear from you. And, of course, remember to subscribe on iTunes. Make sure you get all the episodes downloaded to you automatically when they come out. And just kind of give us some feedback. We'd love to hear from you and love to try to address anything that we can. And as we continue to make the show fun for everybody to listen to. So with that, we're going to go ahead and sign off. I am Chris. I'm not Chris.
Yeah.
What am I saying?
You're using my name because you don't want to you're letting the government think that I've been doing everything in
you got
voices.
My name is Chris Fry. I can be reached at the following address if you have any questions. So I'm Alan.
And I'm Chris.
And we'll see you later.
See you in the ticket line.
Special thanks to Carpal Tuller for the show theme music. For more about Carpal Tuller, visit www.carpaltuller.com. You've been listening to The Mesh, an online media network of shows and programs ranging from business to arts, sports to entertainment, music to community. All programs are available on the website as well as through iTunes and YouTube. Check us out online at themesh.tv. Discover other network shows and give us feedback on what you just heard.